Okay, so as I said, we are doing today's webinar. It is our statewide webinar series, and this month is Behavior Contracts to Promote Independence. We do want to point out some of our upcoming webinars. So on May 7th, we're doing our 4th TEA Corrective Action Plan webinar with Stephen Alleman from Disability Rights Texas. That is on Monday, May 7th, and it will be at 12:15. And then on May 15th, we will do IEPs versus 504. Which one do you need in your corner? So we're going to break down the differences between the IEP and the 504 plans. And that will be presented by Kim Torres, who is our team project director. So before we begin, I do want to introduce our speakers. We have Allison Sheats and Ashley Richardson from the Burkhart Center. And a little bit about both of them. Ashley Richardson is an LMSW. She's the clinical supervisor for outpatient services for the Burkhart Center for Autism Education and Research. Ashley has a master's in social work, specializing in children and families from the University of Texas in Arlington, and she's currently pursuing her license in clinical social work. She has spent more than 8 years working with children, teens, and young adults with special needs as a site program coordinator, transition vocational rehabilitation counselor, and a behavior therapist. She has worked with local school districts, community agencies, employers, and families in creating programs to promote the importance of transition services, social and job skill training, and early intervention for children with autism and other disabilities. Our other speaker is Allison Sheats. She is a clinical supervisor in the outpatient clinical for the Burkhart Center in Autism Education and Research. Allison has a master's in special education, specializing in applied behavior analysis from Texas Tech University, and is a board-certified behavior analyst. She has spent more than 10 years working with individuals with special needs in various capacities, and has been practicing behavior analysis for the last 3 years. While working on her master's degree, Allison conducted research analyzing video modeling to teach social skills to children on the autism spectrum. Additionally, she has worked in the early intensive behavior intervention, focused ABA services, social skills, and job skills training. So good afternoon, ladies.
Hello.
Hello. Thank you for having us.
And I did move the role over to you, so you should be ready to go.
Perfect. Hey, that's awesome. Well, I'm Ashley, and here beside me is Allison, and we are both going to, I'm going to start the presentation, but we're both going to jump in and out, so you're going to hear both of our voices throughout. This is a interactive presentation, like Megan said, so if you have any questions, please feel free to chat us throughout, and we are also going to do an interactive teaching at the end. But of course, if you have any questions, please throw them out, and we'll answer them the best as we can throughout. So I hope everyone's doing great today. We're just going to kind of start and talk about what behavioral contracts are. So behavioral contracts have been used throughout all types of settings. We see a lot in the school systems. Behavioral contracts have been used in employment sites as well, home settings, as well as kind of juvenile justice settings. So a behavioral contract schedules the exchange of positive reinforcements between two or more parties in a situation. So when we're explaining it to families and employers, it teaches reciprocity, and both parties have access to a certain reinforcer. As we stated, it has been used in kind of employment settings, school settings, juvenile justice settings, delinquent settings, and In short, it's a contracting method that ensures that each party, whether that's husband, wife, child, social worker, BCA, probation officer, whomever it is, obtains an acceptable number of those rewards, including behavior changes that pleases them. So you're wanting both parties to kind of get what they want. So, for example, a married couple agrees that on the nights one person cooks, the other one will do the dishes. A parent allows her son to surf the internet in the evening after he finishes his chores. For that situation, both parties are getting something that's positively reinforcing for them. For the child has access to surf on the internet, which we know is probably the highlight for most of the children we work with afternoon. And the parent gets what they want with the child completing the chores. A teenager mows his neighbor's yard in exchange for $30. We explain contracting and behavior contracts as a form of reciprocity, and a great example is us going to work. We don't go to work if we don't get paid. So we have access. You go to work, you get paid. So you do the job that you're assigned to do, and you get that reinforcement in a financial form after that.
So if y'all have ever heard of like first thins, I'm sure we use them a lot with our kiddos, and it's kind of like a formalized first then essentially. It's just a written down form of it, but teaches first, let's engage in the thing that we don't particularly enjoy, and then we can gain access to those things that we find valuable and reinforcing.
So with behavior contracts, they should always do two things. So first, they always need to bring more positive reinforcement into two people's lives. A contract never works if it benefits one party because they're not sustainable. So it needs to bring positive reinforcement into both of the parties' lives. And it provides specific expectations. So when we say specific expectation, it's really important that the expectations or rules or responsibilities, as we'll explain a little later, are very clear and concrete, so both parties understand what the other is expecting out of them to get access to that reinforcement. So for children, if it's used for children, you're wanting to let them know exactly what you want out of them before they receive access to that reinforcer. So it brings more positive reinforcement into people's lives overall.
So if you think about like a parent and a child, these are super beneficial in the home. So mom has a hard time getting kiddo to do homework, and that causes stress on her end, and then kiddo would like more time with their Xbox. So if we can trade that to where mom is now getting homework done with exchange for Xbox time, both of the parties are happier.
Okay, so behavior contracts are based on 4 assumptions. So first, positive reinforcement is a privilege. It's not a right. I know that is kind of difficult to wrap your heads around sometimes, but that access to a reinforcer is a privilege, not a right. We don't have the right to some of those things. It's a privilege. And people choose to deliver positive things to others. So it's all about choice making. So for jobs, for example, you don't receive certain additional privileges if you don't complete certain tasks, or you don't receive bonuses, for example, or yearly merit raises, or things of that nature, or extra vacation time, or comp time.
Or even just your paycheck.
Yeah.
If you come and you sleep at your desk, chances are you'll probably lose your job, and the way you keep your paycheck coming is by doing and fulfilling those responsibilities assigned to you.
Right. So it's definitely, it's a privilege, and no one is obligated to provide, like, for instance, no one's obligated to provide cell phones, cars, friendships. For a lot of our parents, we state a lot of the privileges your children have, whether that's their Xbox, that's free time, that's being able to go to the movies, that is a privilege. And so not a right, and so there's things that they have to do to obtain those privileges. And no one's obligated, there's not a rule out there saying that every child is obligated to have a cell phone, or every child's parents is obligated to buy them the Xbox One that comes out. That's not the case. Relationships are governed by the concept of reciprocity. So the great thing about contracts is, we teach reciprocity at a very young age. And that's the practice of giving things to others for mutual benefit. So in our clinic, we work from ages 3 all the way to adulthood. And when they're young, we teach reciprocity by the exchange of items, whether we're teaching them communication in the form of a picker-exchange system or a requesting system. We teach reciprocity at a very young age. And that helps shape reciprocity and how it looks when they become older, because we just adjusted to what's going on around them. So relationships are governed by reciprocity. Both parties must give and receive in a healthy relationship.
I think like friendships. So we all probably have that one friend where they constantly ask us to do things for them, like, hey, can I use your truck to move? But that friend doesn't reciprocate. It's kind of that same thing as you keep doing, but that friend doesn't reciprocate. Most likely that friendship's not going to maintain. So.
The value of a relationship is related to the amount of reinforcement the parties receive. Like Allison just stated, if you're that friend in a friendship that is always giving, well, the likelihood of you continuing that friendship is really low because you're not receiving anything out of it back. And that's the thing when it comes to children, adults. It doesn't matter what the relationship is. The relationships are based off of, a healthy relationship is based off of reciprocity. Relationships are strongest when people reinforce each other on a regular basis. Rules create freedom, so knowing what to expect, knowing the boundaries. When we first, for instance, if we start working somewhere, we like to know the rules we have, the boundaries we have, what's expected out of us. So knowing that also creates freedom for us in a sense. A clear specification of the consequence for behavior allows a person to make an informed choice between behavior alternatives. So we here at the Burkhart Center, we do a lot of contracts with parents and children. We've done quite a few in employment settings with employers and workers, and we always explain to our parents and also kind of employers, a contract allows them to make the choice of whether they're going to adhere to the rules that are placed in there. So when we say a clear specification of the consequences for behavior allows a person to make an informed choice, well, that person can make the choice on whether they want to adhere to their expectations. If they don't adhere to the expectations, you don't receive the privileges. So, we keep referencing employment. If you don't go to work and adhere to the responsibilities that you have at your job site, you won't receive those standard privileges. Okay, behavioral contracts commonly have the following components. Responsibilities, and we're going to go a little bit in just a minute and go in depth on each of these 4 components, or 5 components, 4 components, excuse me. So I'm just going to present them now. Responsibility is what specifically must be done to earn reinforcement. And so the responsibilities can look like, if you're in the home setting, daily chores. If you're in the school setting, completing certain assignments every day. If you're in an employment setting, following your job requirements. Privileges. What specifically is delivered as reward for completing the responsibilities? And that is going to look a little bit different. That's going to look different for every person, and your privileges are going to change. And you would want the privileges to change throughout, because that's what keeps, a person motivated to complete the responsibilities assigned to them.
So the preferences do change. So, when I was 5, I may have been motivated to work for watching Barney, but now Barney wouldn't be motivating to me. A paycheck's going to be a little bit more motivating and meaningful to me.
And for some teens and adults, a paycheck is not meaningful. We work with a lot of adults on the spectrum that financial gain and money is not meaningful right now. So you have to find something else that might be meaningful. It might be spending time with a friend or engaging engaging in some type of social opportunity with a person that they really like, that is going to be meaningful to them. So those privileges always do change. Bonuses. It's a bigger reward for consecutively completing the responsibilities. That's going to be the long-term, that long-term reward, or a bigger reward, and long-term could be a week. Long-term could be a month. It depends on the person that the contract is designed for. And then monitoring feedback, a method to know what tasks are being completed and if the reward is being delivered. And later on in the slideshow, we're going to provide an example of what a parent-child behavioral contract looks like, and we can give a little bit more information on monitoring and feedback. Okay, here, a sample behavioral contract. A parent-child contract is designed to improve the success of children in the home and school setting. So first, it provides support and predictability for families. That is probably one of the biggest things that our children have difficulty with, and so do our families, they need predictability. And they need that added support. So a contract, I always tell parents, it allows the kind of nagging back and forth between them and their child to not be there, because the contract clearly states what is expected out of the child and out of the parent. So that bartering that a lot of children like to do, but what about this? But no, but you didn't say, and the back and forth bartering, that doesn't happen when it comes to contracts, because you reference back what's in the contract. Your responsibilities are stated there, and it provides that predictability that you're always going to have the same response because it's written in the contract. It increases the likelihood that parents and the child get more of what they want. When contracts are followed as they should be, they work because both parties are getting what they want. There can be amendments to the contract, as we stated before, because privileges are going to change, responsibilities are going to change, but when a contract is consistent and followed, it increases the likelihood that both parties are going to get what they want, that positive reinforcement.
And this can work for all kiddos. So although we work predominantly with the autism population, this we use for all sorts of populations, all sorts of kiddos, we use it for even like adults, because ultimately we all want to know what our clear expectations are. Think about when you're in a job and you don't really know what your role is, that can be hard. So it's similar to at home, making sure that that child has predictability, has a clear expectation of what that parent wants as well, really can help, kind of take that battle out of the home environment.
When designing a parent-child contract, it's important to first consider the goals. We say of treatment, these will inform the responsibilities, or what is your goal? If you're in a classroom setting and your goal is for this child to complete a certain amount of assignments or a certain amount of hit a certain target by a 6 weeks period, that's going to be your goal. If you're a parent in the home setting and you want your child to complete their daily chores of washing dishes, that is going to be the goal. And that's going to help create your responsibilities. And you want to identify likely motivating rewards for the child. And these will inform the privileges or bonuses. So it is important when you are creating the privileges or discussing rewards that you get the input of the child or the person you're working with. So if you are in a home setting and the mom dictates all the rewards for privileges, that might not be motivating for that child, and you're going to see a contract not be as successful. So it's really important to get the child's input in what those rewards are. Now, parents always have the ultimate say, because we have run into in situations where children want $200 for doing one thing. Well, that's not always going to be feasible. So some bartering goes on, but you want the child or the person that's on the opposite end of that contract, whether it's a child or adult, to have input onto what those rewards are, because it has to be motivating and meaningful to them.
That's how you get that buy-in. But yes, it has to be within reason. We had one kid that wanted $20 every time he showered, and that is not feasible for mom to pay him $20 daily.
And then you want to list, prioritize, and define the individual components. Be specific as possible. So these rules are helpful for everyone. It doesn't matter if, like Allison said previously, we do work with mostly individuals with autism and other special needs, but these work for individuals that do not have any varying disabilities. You want to be as specific as possible because you want both parties to know what to expect.
Or it kind of avoids that loophole if you don't clearly define what they use it for showering. If you don't clearly define what showering is, then you get back in that back and forth argument about, well, mom says this is what clean is, and kiddo says clean is just rinsing off with water. Obviously, showering does include soap, so making sure that we kind of break it down to very, very specific so it's very clear.
Responsibilities. So responsibilities are the daily behavioral expectations for the child. First, you should require that the child to engage in behavior that leads to desired outcomes. So you want to, we like to say you want to document the behavior you want to see more of. And then the outcome has to be something, of course, desired, what's desired for you. It should be able to be monitored by the parents. Should be stated in the positive, specifically what the child is to do, not what they shouldn't do. So on a contract, you want to be as clear as possible, and you want to put what's expected out of them, not what we don't want to see. We like to tell parents when you're younger, if your parents always said, don't do this, don't do that, a lot of times they forgot to tell us what they wanted us to do. So it's like, well, they told me don't run in the street, but they didn't tell me exactly where I can run. Or they told me to don't hit my brother, but they didn't tell me what they wanted me to do. So you want to be specific as possible and be stated in a positive light. So tell them what to do. And it should be clearly and specifically defined to avoid conflicts about compliance. Like Allison said, those loopholes. If it's concrete and clear, you won't have to question whether that person is complying with that responsibility listed, and you won't have an opportunity for the other person to find those loopholes because it's clear. But I will tell you, loopholes are going to happen, and if a loophole does happen, that means that person is bought into the contract because it's working, because it's meaningful to them. And you want to make sure that the responsibilities can be monitored by the other party that's in the contract. So if you're in a school setting and it's a teacher and a student, you want to make sure the responsibilities you list, you're able to track those if the child is completing them or not. If you have something, a responsibility that can only be tracked in the home setting, well, that's something that would not be applicable if you're a teacher, because you want to make sure that you're able to monitor the progress and the completion of those responsibilities.
All right, and now we are going to go to the privilege section. So the privilege section is probably the most important part to have that input from the child or whoever that you're creating this contract from, because this is ultimately where you're going to get that buy-in from. So whatever you're choosing, you want to make sure that it's something important to that individual and something motivating, because if you just decide what you think might be motivating, that's most of the time when we see those contracts fail, because that individual is not motivated by it, so they're not going to engage in the things that they don't, the responsibilities that are probably going to be things they don't particularly enjoy. So the privileges are those daily rewards given to the child for meeting your responsibility. So we have a couple sections of the behavior contract. So there's privileges and bonuses, which we're going to talk about bonuses next. But privileges is that daily part. So it gives that daily buy-in of having a reinforcer every single day. This is especially important because it continues to reinforce every day. It promotes like, hey, I did it, I get something, so it brings that reinforcement and positivity into the house. So each responsibility needs to have a corresponding privilege. This is because, say if you had 3 responsibilities on there, so you had showering, do your homework, and mow the lawn. If you have one reward tied to that, then most likely if they decide they don't want to shower that day, they're not going to get, they're not going to get reinforced for the other things that they did, and B, they're more likely to not do those things because they chose to not do the other thing. So that's why it's important. A lot of times I tell parents, look at what that kiddo is doing if you left them completely alone. What would they go do? What would they go find? Usually that's what you're going to want to link to that daily reward. Something that we did that worked really well here in the clinic was we had a kiddo who didn't particularly enjoy showering. So what we did is every night when he went to bed, Mom would go take the computer cord to the computer because that's what he loved. So she'd take the computer cord. As soon as he was showered, he got the computer cord back. And that was meaningful and valuable to him. And that's what's super important is if she chose, hey, guess what? After you shower, you get to go take a walk. That's not very cool. Do you think that kid's going to shower? Probably not. Or, hey, because you just did all the dishes, I'm going to go let you play with your little sister. You can play dress up. I highly doubt that kid will ever do the dishes. So making sure that you know that it's something that's super duper duper motivating to them. A lot of times we see computers, Xboxes, cell phones. We have one kid that he had a basket and all his electronics went in at night. As soon as he did his responsibilities when he got home, he could go in the basket and he could get those things. And it has to be something that the child can't get anywhere else. So we always tell parents, pick your battles. So if there's something that you know that's really motivating, but you are not willing to withhold it, don't put that on the contract because then the contract's not going to work because you can't withhold it. So you have to make sure it's something that you can feasibly withhold. Some creative ways that we have withheld, electronic devices, taking power cords, taking batteries. That's one way that they can't have access to the item, and we can make sure that we can control when they get it. So the other thing is that it needs to be clearly and specifically defined to avoid conflict. So say if you put in your privilege section, as soon as you shower, you get your Xbox. Well, that doesn't give a cutoff time for the Xbox. So that could imply a loophole of, hey, I get my Xbox for the rest of my life because it doesn't give a cutoff. So then you're going to probably get into that battle. So we always give a clear defined time of you get an Xbox for an hour, you get an Xbox for 2 hours, or you get Xbox until bedtime, and then we define what bedtime is, say 10 o'clock, to make sure that there's a clear time on when they get that privilege and when that privilege is taken away so that it can start fresh for the new day.
And if you're working with adults or college students, you have to make sure you're able to control those privileges. We had mentioned, with our kids, we can control yanking the internet cord, but if they're in college, you really can't do that. So you would have to find a privilege that is going to be more meaningful to them that you can control. So that might be having access to certain social opportunities, or it might be having access to other things on campus. So you would have to figure out something that you would be able to control, because it's hard to control the internet cord when they need internet for class, or if they're off away to college, parents can't actually control those things. So that's very important to remember.
Yes. So now is the bonus portion. So the bonus portion is another form of reinforcement that rewards them for long-term compliance with the contract. So this promotes them not cherry-picking, I'll do the contract on Monday and Wednesday and maybe Saturday. It keeps them motivated to want to do it daily, because ultimately, is it really that much of help if the kids are doing it 50% of the time? Probably not. So basically, it's going to be a bigger reward. So your privileges are the smaller ones, kind of like I mentioned, like your cell phone, your Xbox, things that you can feasibly give daily. Bonuses are where you're going to have a little bit bigger of a reward. So one thing that we like to use a lot is a lot of parents are already providing allowance for kids. So shift kind of where that allowance goes to tying it to doing this contract consecutively. Or it can be, we'll find money, a lot of times it's money, honestly. That's usually what we find motivating for the older kiddos especially, is it's usually some kind of money, but finding what is motivating for that money. So that may be gift cards. We had one kid that really wanted a PS4, and so mom went and got like a bunch of $7 GameStop cards because he didn't care about money, but he cared about gift cards. And so for complying with contract, he would get GameStop cards. And that was a good way to give him, you know, an extra reinforcement for complying with it multiple days in a row. And once that kid got off the contract, he never didn't do it for a single day. So each responsibility also needs to have a corresponding bonus as well. So it's that same thing of if they decided they didn't want to shower that day, we don't want to like start the clock completely over with everything. It also gives that kind of added bonus of like, look at all this reinforcement. So it can still be like money. So a lot of times we like to say $1 a day. That's usually kind of our rule of thumb. So it's usually going to be delivered about every 1 to 2 weeks. That also depends on the kid and how long you think that that kiddo can kind of wait for that bonus. If it's schoolwork, a lot of times we do 5 consecutive days, so there's 5 school days. If it's like showering, we're going to do 7 consecutive days, and a lot of times we do that $1 a day. So if you want to put money in both of them, then you break it up and you do $3 for responsibility 1, $3 for responsibility 2. Or we've seen parents say, hey, like, kiddo really likes to go to the ice cream shop. So one might be the money and one might be the outing to the ice cream shop. So it has to be something not available anywhere else, kind of in their environment, outside of the contract or inside. So it does have to be something that they cannot get anywhere else to make it meaningful. And then the rewards, so it doesn't need to include the one that's delivered daily. It needs to be something that maybe not occurs a lot, like concert tickets, shopping trips, things like that, things that are bigger rewards. Let's see, there is a question. What is the best way to communicate with my teenager if he doesn't want to do something? So what I would say is using these contracts could be super beneficial. So I always tell parents, take kind of if you use a contract, then you don't have to force them to do it. So find what's powerful, kind of like what we talked about. What's powerful, what's meaningful to that teenager, and withhold that. So if it's that teenager's cell phone, if it's a daily thing that you don't want him to do or that he's not wanting to do, tie the cell phone to it. If it's something that's like not daily, so like one example that we had was like mowing the lawn. You're not going to mow the lawn every day. One kiddo had money tied to it. So I would just say, try to find those things that you freely give right now, and instead of freely giving them, tie them to doing the things that they don't want to do.
And the things that you freely give, you would have to be okay with withholding. So there's certain things that parents freely give and aren't okay with withholding. The important thing is you would have to withhold it. And when we talk to our teenagers about these contracts, we kind of phrase it as, you know, hey, I'm trying to help you get what you want. You know, in order for you to get what you want, I need to get what I want too, but we want to help you get what you want. And this is like a win-win situation. And most teens understand that. But it's going to be those things that you freely give, you would also have to be comfortable with withholding those.
Yes, and ultimately making it that teen's choice, but making what you're withholding so powerful enough that they will want to do it. And so a lot of times, especially with teenagers, we see them be like, whatever, I don't want that. and they try to call our bluff. And so I say, if you decide that you're going to take away that cell phone until whatever that's done that they don't want to do, you hold to it, because they're teenagers. They're going to test your contingency, and they're going to be like, is she really going to withhold? And so sometimes you may see them test you several times to see, like, are you really going to withhold, or are you going to cave? And so we get a lot of that where they try to act like they don't care, and they're just trying to see if we will cave or see if they can flip us out of it. And so that's what I would say, is just really try that reciprocity piece, and try to not get in that back and forth banter with them. Say, like, this is what I want done. As soon as it's done, you get X, Y, and Z. Let me know if you choose to do it. And then you walk off, especially the teenagers, because they're going to want to get in that banter, and all they're doing with that banter is they're just trying to persuade you, and they're probably not listening to anything that you say. So that's what that would be my tidbit of advice. I hope that answers it.
And hold your ground, because that's probably the hardest part, because teenagers, it's going to be like a slot machine. If you ever go and gamble and you put money in a slot machine, well, sometimes you might hit, sometimes you might not. So that's the same thing that a teenager's doing when they're going back and forth with that bantering. They know, well, if I keep at it, somebody's going to cave. Mom's going to cave, and so dad's going to cave. Somebody's going to cave. So it's really important to, and they're just testing that, because if parents cave every fifth time, well, they're going to think, well, it worked every fifth time, so I'm going to keep trying it.
Yep, exactly. Hopefully that answers your question. If not, we'll have time at the end, and we can expand a little bit more on that as well. So the next portion is the monitoring and feedback. So I'm going to show y'all a example of a contract here in a few slides so that you can kind of see how we structure one. And so basically the monitoring and feedback portion is the part where all parties kind of agree if the behavior is occurring and if the reinforcement is delivered. So it's also ensuring that this contract is having an effect on the behavior. So sometimes, especially like in the clinic when we do these, we have parents bring in a week's worth of the contract to see if that child is engaging in the responsibilities or not. Because if the child's not doing it, then most likely we don't have an effective reinforcer. So how it's going to work is the parent and the child, or whoever this is going to be with, are going to each review the contract daily. So there's going to be a spot for youth responsibility. For each of the responsibilities, there's going to be a spot for each of their privileges, and then there's going to be another spot to initial for their bonus to see have they done it consecutively, and on this day, is that bonus supposed to be awarded or not? So the reason for that is we're A, ensuring is the kid doing it or not, and B, ensuring that the parent is also holding up at their end of the bargain. So sometimes we will see, we'll send contracts home, and kiddos will start doing the contract, and then mom will forget to sign it, and then mom won't deliver reinforcer, mom or dad. But we will see that sometimes where they'll say, well, they did it, and then they stopped doing it. And so sometimes I'll say, well, did you give them that 25 cents that you promised them? And they'll say, well, no. And I'm like, well, that's why they stopped doing it, because there was a contract written that if I do this, I get this, and if they don't gain that reinforcement, they're not going to keep doing it. Just like if we go to work and our first 2 weeks comes around and we don't get a paycheck, chances are I'm probably going to stop going to work and go find a new job. And so it just looks at, are both parties holding it up? So what it's going to look like is no matter what, you're going to sign it. So if they choose to engage in that responsibility, you're going to put a check with both initials of both parent and child agreeing that, hey, we both agree that this responsibility was fulfilled to how the contract states. And then if they choose to not do it, both parties are going to they're going to put an X, and both parties will initial, agreeing that both parties agree that the individual did not fulfill those responsibilities. So that also kind of holds that accountability piece with the child kind of saying, hey, like, you're choosing not to do that, and that's your choice, but I just want you to acknowledge that you lost that daily privilege and that your clock starts over for that bonus, because that bonus is going to be consecutive days of doing that. Okay, so now we go to the interactive part. So this is where we would really love for y'all to kind of put some input in. So the example is that Charlie is 12 years old. He frequently refuses to do his morning routine. Oh, so I didn't even tell y'all what we're doing. Now we're making a contract. So I'm going to read you an example, and then we're going to pull up a contract on my computer, and we're going to make one so that y'all kind of have an example of how you can figure out how to structure it. So the first example is Charlie is 12 years old. He frequently refuses to do his morning routine. The morning routine consists of getting dressed, brushing teeth, eating breakfast, taking medication. Additionally, when Charlie gets home from school, he does not want to do his homework due to the fact that his mom can't get him off the Xbox. Continued. So Charlie reported he wants to do Minecraft game. And Mom reported Charlie plays his iPad on the way to school and Xbox after school until bed. How about I could just share the screen? Okay, so now I'm going to share my screen so that we can fill it in. I hope they can still see the presentation. They can't. And I can't see anyone's chat box.
Hey, Allison, I will read you the chat box portion.
Okay.
Okay, perfect. Because I was like, oh no.
Don't worry about that.
Okay, great. So the first part is going to be a daily responsibility. So there's going to be two. I'll go ahead and give y'all that hint. What do y'all think would be some good daily responsibilities for Charlie?
And type that into the chat box. Okay, so we have somebody that says get ready for school. Someone says do homework, complete the morning routine.
Right. Okay, so both are right. So the first
medication with somebody else's.
Awesome.
Yes, awesome. So y'all are on the right track. So one definitely should be complete morning routine. And then the other one definitely should be complete homework. Now, the other part is we need to expand on this because what is the morning routine?
So that's when we say you want to be as specific as possible.
Can y'all still see the example to be able to read it? I hope so.
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, good. Let's pop one that's brushing teeth. Some of them are popping up.
Brushing teeth, getting dressed, combing hair, eat breakfast.
Right. So getting dressed. So you'll want to, how you'll want to do it is you will want to break it down into like clearly define what's my morning routine. So the first one would be getting dressed. The other one would be brushing teeth. I know that one was up there too. Brushing teeth would be a good one. So basically I'm just reading them off of the example because that's what Mom reported as being his routine. Eating breakfast, and then taking medication. And this is also going to change depending on each kiddo. So some kiddos might need a little bit more specific. So some kids don't need all the breakdown steps of getting dressed, but some kids might need, getting dressed means putting on underwear, putting on shirt, putting on pants, putting on socks, things like that. Brushing teeth may need to be further broken down of there is toothpaste on the toothbrush. You lather it on your teeth for 2 minutes, spit it out, use mouthwash, things like that. So that also depends on your kid and what supports that they might need. So that will be that morning routine portion is that. Now homework. How can we expand to define, how do you define what completed homework actually is?
And it's going to be different for, you know, there's not a one right answer to this because it's going to be different. It depends on, like, your child's homework might look differently from another child, so.
Right. So, I know for like some kids have folders, and if your homework comes in the red folder, making sure all the pages in the red folder are completed. So we want to like clearly define that. If you go through and check the kiddos' work to make sure that it's correct before they turn it in, you would want to include that, where it would be like all of the pages in the red folder have been completed and parent has checked to make sure that it was completed. I'm asking what his plan is. Oh no, the chat goes away before I can see it.
So I ask what his plan is to complete the homework, then we discuss the schedule of activities that may be a hindrance to meeting his plan.
Yes, so we'll want a clear plan for each time to define it, and then that would also be a good conversation to have like once they get home to make sure like, hey, what's your plan for today? What might be hard for you? But in this, you want that, we call it an operational definition, a clear definition of what completed homework looks like. So I'll go ahead.
Somebody said, would it be a good idea to have a checklist from the teacher listing all the homework for that day?
Yes, that would be awesome.
If you can get that, that would be awesome. Something we've used too is like sometimes with all the technology we have now, there will be like online grade books. And so sometimes our parents can go check and see what assignments they're missing, and that's kind of how they judge. So that could be defined as, you know, we go into the grade book and see that all assignments are completed and turned in.
It can be the same for online assignments, because we have our high school students that do a lot of online work, and you might decide completed is them reaching 80% or 70% on a assignment that must be completed by the end of the week if they have some online assignment. So that can be another form of having checking to see if your homework is completed.
Yeah. So for today, let's go ahead and put, let's pretend, name the kid Bobby. Let's pretend Bobby has Charlie. Oh my gosh, the kid actually has a name. I was like, let's make up a kid's name. Charlie. So let's pretend Charlie has a red folder. So how we would write it is all pages in red folder are completed. And then you would put, and parent has checked to see all problems are fully done.
And so there are going to be loopholes, because, you know, I know a question might be, well, what if Charlie decides to take all the pages out of his red folder before he gets home, and he won't have homework? Well, then that's a perfect example of a loophole. Then we would have to figure out another way to define completed homework, and it might be getting a email from teacher or written down note from teacher on all the assignments that must be due, because I know that question is probably popping up because we've had kids definitely take homework out of folders.
That is why we always say all of these contracts have to be super individualized to that individual. Especially if you're a parent, you know what tricks your kids probably have up their sleeves. So always just staying one step ahead of them. So from our example, what do you think a good privilege would be for the morning routine?
Tablet in school, choose music in the car.
Oh, choose music in the car. I love that one.
That one's a nice one. So that's, I'm going to go with the iPad. That was the combination of iPad and tablet, because it says Charlie plays it on the way to school. So your morning routine is going to happen in the morning, and he's going to get the tablet right after. So that gives that immediate reinforcement of choosing to do that morning routine to get that in exchange. So we will go ahead and say tablet on the way to school. I don't know what's happening with my formatting, but you'll get it. There we go. And that also clearly, so we talked about clearly defining that privilege and how long the individual gets it. Tablet on the way to school defines that once you get to school, tablet's gone. So it doesn't just say, you earn your tablet for the day, because then most likely Charlie's going to say, cool, I don't have to listen at school. I can just sit on my tablet while my teacher talks. So now what do you think is a good option for the privilege for completing homework? Are we good on time, Megan, by the way?
Yeah, you're good. You can go ahead and finish, and then we will wrap up for anybody that needs to get off, and we'll do the Q&A session.
Okay, perfect. I saw Xbox, so there is a great use privilege. So now how would we want to clearly define when that would end? To make sure kiddo doesn't get it. 1 hour. That works. I like 1 hour. So earns Xbox for 1 hour. Xbox time for 1 hour.
It might even be more specific. We can say 1 hour after school. You could say 1 hour in the evening.
Yeah. Okay, and then the bonus is, what would be his good bonuses? So we're looking at that long-term compliance. So it's going to be a little bit bigger than his Xboxes or the tablet. What do you think would be something that he would find motivating? Buy the new Xbox game. Yeah. So it says that he wants Minecraft. So I would definitely use that. And so we can go with money here. So say $1 a day. We tell him that he needs to do these things consecutively for $1 a day. Let's just make it easy. Let's make it $4 and $4 instead of going over cents or whatever. So here I would say if Charlie complies with his morning routine for 7 consecutive days, he earns $4. Some kids would be cool with $4, some kids wouldn't. Younger kids usually are ones who get a little older. Sometimes they want a little bit more money. We try to not make parents go broke when we do this. And then the last one would be if Charlie, if I can spell his name, completes his homework. We have that. I like that word better. Completes his homework for 7 consecutive, oh my gosh, if I can spell consecutive days, he earns $4. Oh my goodness gracious. Okay, and so I did see that somebody else said like going to the movies. So that's an awesome one that you could, if you were talking to Charlie, you could negotiate and you could say, hey, like, do you like going to the movies? Do you want to earn that? And so then you could swap it, and it could be Charlie earns $8 for doing his morning routine, and then he earns time going to the movies with whoever he chooses, if that's something that Charlie likes. So I know, and then down here, if y'all, I think y'all can see my mouse. These are the boxes that both child and parent are going to sign. So if you notice, there's one for each responsibility, one for each privilege, one for each bonus, and then the child signs their name and parent signs their name to both agree that they meet the terms of the contract. So I know that we are almost in the time, so I'm going to go ahead and stop there. And now we can kind of go to that question and answer portion. I'm going to stop sharing this. All right. Look at you. That's going good. I know.
Okay. And Allison, just so we have it on recording, you can go ahead and share your contact information, and we'll wrap up. And then if everybody will start putting your questions in the chat box, we will get back to those as soon as we turn off the recording.
Okay. There is both of our emails. If y'all want to see them, feel free to reach out and email us if you have any questions. If you are called in on a phone and can't see it, my email is Allison, which is ALLISON, .Sheats, which is SHEATS, @ttu.edu. And then Ashley's is Ashley, ASHLEY.Richardson, which is RICHARDSON @ttu.edu. So feel free to email us with any questions that you might have.
We do also want to share the next slide. So Allison, if you can change that for me.
I sure can.
Perfect. This is our information. So again, we are Partners Resource Network. You can contact us. We have information for myself. I'm Megan Sanders, Training and Evaluation Specialist. We also have Chuck No, who is our Education Specialist, with his email. And then you can pull information about our statewide webinars at the link listed in the chat box and find us on Facebook. We really appreciate you all being here. Please do not leave. If you have questions, Allison and Ashley have agreed to stay on and answer those questions for you at this time. So you can go ahead and start putting those in the chat box. But again, thank you guys for coming, and let us know any questions that you have.
Okay, so I already see a few questions.